All right, everyone. Well, thank you for joining us again. My name is Dante Bills, and I am the coach for the Far Northeast.
And I'm Drea Aguirre. I am the primarily secondary coach for the Near Northeast.
So in strategy 3, we're going to give you all some best practices for peer-to-peer editing and review, and just kind of go through different strategies and tools that you can use to make this a successful practice in your classroom. So I'm gonna give everyone a minute or two to read this section, and then we'll join back together. All right, so from this passage, the primary thing that we want to pull from this is we want to give students the time and space to be able to communicate and share what they understand about different topics that are going on in their classroom. So this is kind of the thing that we want to take going forward, is just making sure we're providing students with the time and space as well as the tools to do this in a beneficial manner.
All right, so we're really going to hone in on the feedback part of this. And so again, rooting ourselves in the CRE mindset focus, we're really honed in on practice 5, which is making sure that we are giving students the tools that they need to become social critics. And not only will they be able to make decisions that are pertinent to them in the classroom, but we're going to teach them skills that they are going to use for the rest of their lives. So how they can make reflective decisions and then implement those decisions within their personal lives, social lives, political lives, and like economic decisions. So in order to do this, we are going to make sure that they're getting high quality feedback. And not only are they going to get high quality feedback, but we want to make sure that they can also give high quality feedback and give it in a way that's receptive towards others. Again, this is a skill that's going to be highly beneficial to our students throughout their entire professional careers, not just in our classrooms. And so in this session, we're going to focus hard on the how to teach our students how to give each other feedback. I'm sure that you've been in similar situations to me where, you know, I would just tell my students to give each other feedback on something and they would all stare at me, or they would say, that was great. And that's the only feedback they got. That's not very productive. So we want to make sure that we are giving our students the tools to give each other super productive feedback. And it's going to help them critically think through the different components of the assignments that they are feedbacking on.
So this slide is just giving everyone a few pointers towards having successful peer-to-peer feedback. One of the things we want to stress is that you cannot just simply, as Drea just stated, you can't just simply tell your students, go do peer-to-peer feedback, because you're going to get a lot of critiques that aren't really meaningful or helpful to the student's success in writing the paper or doing the assignment. So we want to be very intentional about the feedback that students are giving, but also be intentional as educators about how we're preparing our students. So with peer-to-peer feedback, we want to make this a regular process in our classrooms. So for example, in our previous session, we just had a teacher speak about how this is a monthly process that they do, is engage in peer-to-peer feedback and helping build the students' skills and making them more knowledgeable about this process overall. To increase your students' knowledge and ability to engage in peer-to-peer feedback, you want to provide them with guided practices, with rubrics, worksheets, giving them specific look-fors in regards to what they're looking for in their peers' essay or assignment, if it's a thesis statement. So you want to be very specific and detailed in what you're asking your students to do to increase their skills and ability to do this well and help each other out. Really, one of the primary goals that we want our students to get to is to get to a point where they can identify what they want critiqued or edited in their assignments and essays, so they can tell their peer, hey, I'm struggling with my thesis statement. Can you take a look at this and tell me what you think? So again, the intentionality behind this is very important as educators, and making sure that we're really trying to push forward and teach the students how to do this and do it well. So this slide is just one example of a guide for students to use. This is the SPARK model. There's countless number of different guides and rubrics for peer-to-peer editing. So it's kind of just finding whatever one works best for you, your students, and your classroom. The key to this again is that being intentional behind it. So incorporating whatever your guide is or whatever your rubric is, incorporating that into a worksheet or a grading rubric for the students to use when they're doing peer-to-peer editing.
So here's how we want to structure this time. We want to make sure that, again, like the priority of these sessions is for you to have workshopping time so that you can come out of these sessions with ready to go strategies or worksheets or lessons that you could implement sometime this week. And so if you feel like you have a pretty solid understanding of implementing peer-to-peer feedback, then you feel free to keep your camera off, keep your mic off, work independently. We really want to make sure that the things that we're walking away with is we want to make sure that we are teaching kids how to provide each other feedback. So just like taking notes, we can't just expect that our kids innately know how to do it. They have to learn those skills. And so thinking through in your classroom based off of what like your lesson structures look like, what is going to be the best plan for you to implement different ways that they can give each other feedback, and how are you going to teach them how to use that feedback? Think about when you're going through and making your materials for this, how you're going to model for them to give feedback to each other. Think about how you are going to develop rubrics that are student friendly, so that they can go on and like evaluate each other. Think of the ways that you are going to make sure that they are providing each other with high quality feedback and not just, oh, okay, looks great. And if you want to follow along with us, what we're going to do is we're going to watch a couple of videos. So the first video that we're going to watch is more about the what and the why. So like, why do we want peers to give each other feedback? And then we're going to take a look at an example of this video is first graders giving each other feedback. So if we can pilot peer-to-peer feedback in first grade, we can definitely do it in our secondary levels. Probably not in the exact same way, but we will also talk through different ways to have a more secondary approach to it. We'll then go through a couple of different ways that we can leverage Google Drive, primarily Google Docs and the tools that Google Docs already has built in and embedded. That would be really helpful when it comes to peer-to-peer feedback. We'll talk through some ideas about how you can teach feedback using Pear Deck, and then we'll just have some open brainstorming time for us to be available to just talk through some pitfalls you might be experiencing, or just go through and like talk out what may be best to start off with in your classroom. So again, if you are ready to go ahead and just like turn your volume off and work away, or you can keep us on in the background. You live your best life. But we're going to go ahead and get started with this video of creating a culture of revision.
I numbered the lines in your tribute poems. When somebody's giving you feedback, they can name the specific line number.
I like stanza 1 because it has really strong figurative language.
Because our students participate in critique protocol, they have the opportunity to really understand what quality looks like and to define for themselves their expectations for achieving it.
Starting as early as preschool, the culture of revision and of learning together is better is what sets up students to be very proficient in their ability to receive critical feedback and to give critical feedback.
I have a couple of your friends' work.
Today in class, we looked at our work to see if we could fix anything.
What are our rules when we are critiquing and making our friends' work better? Yes.
Don't feel like, I hate your work.
Very good. We should always be
Kind.
Oh, yes.
The rules of critique, be kind, be specific, and be helpful, apply to all of the work we do with critique.
First, we're going to look at Jessica's work.
We looked at one student's work. The task itself was to use measurement descriptions to order a number of animals, like insects and arachnids.
So she read that it was half the weight of the rose-haired tarantula.
We looked at her work and we talked about, wow, how is this really strong?
What did Jessica do?
She drew pictures and she labeled them.
Interesting.
You can learn more about it and you're teaching others about what you learned.
What could she do to make that even clearer?
The way that I think about a critique is it's back and forth. I'm gonna give you some feedback on how you can make your work more clear, but I'm also getting really good ideas from you.
She could put things that are lighter at the top and write the things that she needed to write up there.
It shows them that no matter what, people should learn from their work. You can learn from other people's work, and there's always the potential to make it even better.
And what are the measurement words?
Lighter
And heavier.
I think there are a number of ways that you could approach critique. One is to use a high quality piece of work and have kids observe it and make comments about it. And then there's peer-to-peer critique.
I feel like we need to add a little bit more rhyming scheme to it.
I've been doing critique since my first year at Two Rivers. In 7th grade, you're on a deeper level of critiquing, you're like more specific.
Marcus, what are we doing today?
I can give and receive feedback to improve my peers' tribute and my group's tribute.
Okay, so think about the guiding question of how can this poem show and describe rather than just tell?
Having a very detailed, concrete structure really makes sure that students sit with the work and analyze it.
So my tribute poem is on the real story of slavery. Our poem's in draft 3. We're getting critique right now, so we can move on to draft 4, and eventually I believe draft 5 will be our final product.
I still think throughout the poem, you should give like more detail about who she was, because I know that by the hard work, I'll end up with a really high quality piece because my friends are here to help me.
We need to make a stronger ending.
You're asking them to do a lot more work, you're asking them to keep thinking, and you're basically changing the idea of what it means to be done with something.
It adds fun.
Okay. Our students work very hard here at Two Rivers to ensure that their craftsmanship is really on point to best convey their ideas. And their ability to participate in critique just gets better and better.
See, you just came up with a great suggestion.
And so some key points to take away from that. One, you'll notice that the work that students are giving feedback on it for each other, it's not final products where they turned it in and they're done and it's graded and we're done. The whole process is about revision and making changes and having it be feedback that's actually implemented. The other thing that you'll notice is that students, like these teachers, have clearly made it a routine in their classroom to continuously give opportunities for students to provide each other with feedback. And they look at it not as an attack or your work isn't good enough, but really as people are trying to help me grow and become better. And I think that not only is that good for students to get, you see that they're using a whole lot of academic language authentically, but on top of that, it really helps to make sure that we're creating a group of students who are going to go out into the workforce and be really receptive towards critique and observation, and really would love to partake in growing themselves as professionals. And they're not going to be off-put by any sort of working criticism that comes their way. And so that's the why and the what. So why should we be giving each other, why should we be giving peers the opportunity to reflect and give each other feedback on their work? And so what we're going to do now is we're going to look at some of the how. Again, this is a primary school example, and we will talk through during our debrief period about how we can, make this an example that would be really relatable to middle schoolers or high schoolers. But we're going to watch a video called Austin's Butterfly, and it's all about how this teacher has set up a process of revision for his students. And this is the teaching process of how students should give feedback and what kind of feedback that they should be giving.
What would you guys say to teachers if they're not getting high quality work? Could they learn something from this, and what would you say to them that they could do differently in their classrooms?
This is a story called Austin's Butterfly, and it's a true story about a first grade boy, and his name is Austin, and he goes to school, or used to go to school, in a town called Boise, Idaho. And in his class in Boise, Idaho, they were studying butterflies, and he had to do a project. His job in first grade was to draw a butterfly, and this is the butterfly that he picked. Austin had to use this photograph as his model, and he had to draw an accurate scientific drawing of this butterfly. This is called a tiger swallowtail.
I knew it!
Can you tell, Toby, why it's called tiger?
Because it kind of has the stripes of the tiger right there.
Good. So here was Austin's job. He was supposed to do a scientific drawing of that butterfly. But remember, Austin was only in first grade. And you know what he did? He forgot to look like a scientist carefully. He got his paper and he just started to draw the image of a butterfly that he had in his head. And he wasn't looking like a scientist, and so this is what he drew.
Whoa.
It's not bad, and it is a butterfly, but does it look exactly like this?
No.
No, it doesn't yet. It doesn't look exactly like this yet. And so they didn't look at this and say, good, Austin, you're done. They said, Austin, good start. Now we can start giving you critique so you can do a second draft and make it better, and a third draft and make it better, and you can make it much, much closer to this. And he was ready to go. All of the first graders in his critique group sat on the floor like you guys are, and they decided to split their advice into two kinds. First, just the shape of the wings. And then when the shape was right, they'd give him advice about the pattern inside the wings. Alia, what would you say?
You can make it much pointier.
Good. These wings could be much pointier. Who else would add something? Atak, what would you say?
How about the angle? Because, not to be mean about
Yes.
the angle, it's just not exact, so...
Okay, so show me. Come on up here, Atak. Show me what you would ask him to do slightly differently.
Like to make it a little longer.
Longer where? Draw where you would do it.
Right there.
Okay, so pull this out longer.
Yeah.
That's very specific, Atak. Thank you. Jamila, what would you say?
It's like triangle?
Good. Jamila, I love that. So you're saying more like a triangle shape. And I agree. Well, you know what? Those first graders came up with most of those same ideas. And you know what Austin said? He said, okay, I'll go try. And he went back to his seat and he drew this.
Wow.
Does this look more like a triangle?
Yeah.
Yeah. Did he go out further, like Atak was suggesting?
Yes. Yeah.
Did he add some jaggedness here?
Yes.
Like Cindy? Did he get rid of that bottom thing?
Yes.
So he did listen to his friends, and he made it better. It's not perfect. Toby, what would you say?
I'd say don't put those little tail things so pointed in. I'd say put them more pointed down.
Good. Okay, and Ethan, what would you say?
I think you should make the wings like this, not like this.
Okay, he listened to his friends, and they said, this is really a lot better, Austin. That second draft really is better.
Yeah, maybe you can make a third one.
Good. Maybe he could make a third draft. And so he did this draft.
That's his third draft.
That's his third draft, Hadley. That's just right. Elijah, what do you notice there?
Well, one wing's more pointed than the other, and that side is a little bit higher than the others.
Good. Coburn?
Right here, it doesn't have the inside thing still.
Ah, okay. Needs a little bit more of that notch. So, do you think maybe he should do a fourth draft?
Yeah.
Well, that's just what he said. He said, shoot, okay, I got round again. I'll go back and do a fourth draft.
Listen.
He listened. Does it look more even like Elijah was suggesting?
Yes.
Yeah, and does it look like it's coming out a little sharper, like Cindy was suggesting? And like Attack was saying, it's a little, the angle looks a little better. So now Austin was feeling really good. He said, am I ready to add some pattern? And they said, okay, why don't you try adding some of the pattern? And he did.
He's good at it. He is so good.
And then they said, Austin, you're ready for color. Let's look at his last draft. And what do you think? Did it come out really good?
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think about how much progress he made? And Tak, what would you say about his progress?
He made like a lot of progress. He persevered doing it. His friends were honest with him.
What was it about the kinds of advice that they gave that allowed him to get better each time? Hassan?
Well, they told him what was wrong about it.
Did they say it's just wrong, or were they more specific than that?
They were more specific, but they weren't mean about it.
Great. Hadley?
He made 6 drafts.
And so is that something that other kids should learn from? What should we learn from that?
We can make other drafts if it's not right.
Good. So if it's not right, you can keep doing more drafts to make it better.
You just don't use things in your head. You want to use a sharp eye.
Good. He used the eyes of a scientist. Great.
So our big takeaways there are, one, they've created this culture of revision in their class. So Austin is making 6 drafts of this butterfly drawing, and each draft has something else that he is like intentionally focused on. So we have students providing very intentional, specific, clear feedback, and they're not giving it all to him at once. So there's very focused on one aspect. They give him the feedback, he goes, he makes the revisions, comes back, and then they continue to give him more and more feedback. And the second thing that I really want to highlight is that when they create this culture of revision, what happens is that revising work doesn't become a punishment. So it's not because it's bad, it's not because they didn't put enough effort into it. That's just the expectation, is that every single person is going to implement feedback and have multiple revisions. So it's not an additional thing, it's not an extra thing. And again, we noticed that they're not giving feedback to things that have already been graded, or they're not gonna count again just because, like, they are giving feedback to products that are constantly evolving and changing. They're not in their final draft yet, and they're very intentionally not in their final draft. So while we might not be asking our middle schoolers and high schoolers to draw butterflies, we are asking them to do a variety of different things. And so making sure that we are giving students opportunities to provide very targeted, specific feedback to students, it's going to be a game changer. And again, like, making sure that this is a constant piece of our classroom, that we are constantly giving them the space to, like, have those revisions, to give each other feedback, where it becomes a routine in our classroom. That's where we're going to start to see really high quality peer feedback.
All right. So what I'm going to jump into next is how to use Google Docs for peer-to-peer editing. We chose Google Docs because we're just going to leverage a platform that our students are in on a regular basis. So to begin, the one thing I want to point out to help our teachers and those in the classroom is to use Schoology to your advantage. So let me share my page. So what we want to do on Schoology is that if you're going to be using Google Docs, you want to assign that, you want to make the assignment and use Google Docs to do that. So what you're going to do is click Add Materials, Add Assignments. And you'll go ahead and name that assignment. And then you're going to get the assignment from your Google Drive. So just as a heads up, you're going to have to create this prior to creating the assignment. You'll have to create the document in your Google Drive and then locate that and then add it to the assignment. So go ahead and click Google Drive. And And then just as a heads up, these are in no particular order, and Drea shared it earlier, in her time using the Google Drive. When you use Schoology, it's not in any particular order. So if you created an assignment, feel free to use the search bar up here. But for this one, I know exactly what I'm looking for. So I'm gonna use a final essay submission and attach that to this assignment. And assign it to a category. And then I'll go ahead and create this. And again, when you're doing this, you can add all the information you need for your particular assignment. So I'm gonna go ahead and create this. And the reason that we were particular in highlighting this aspect of it in particular is because it gives you a place to where you can see all of your students' assignments. So I'm gonna go ahead and go into that assignment. And then once it loads up, so then for that assignment that you pulled from your Google Drive, you can see where your students are at in regards to their progress. For me, none of my students have even opened the assignment yet. But once they do, on this tab, you're able to see what progress they've made. And then for your students who have completed the assignment, you can click submissions and you'll be able to see the work that they submitted. So in regards to the peer-to-peer editing, when the students are using Google Docs and you do it through the Schoology platform, you can constantly check their progress and see the feedback that they're providing one another as they're working their way through this assignment. So next, I want to jump into using Google Docs itself as an editing tool. So the first thing for your students, when you begin this project of peer-to-peer editing and begin this regular process of doing this, the first thing you're going to want to do is have the students share the assignment with their partners or their group. So go over here and click the blue tab, and then you'll have the students put in their partner or their group's email address right here. So their lunch number with the @dpsk12.net. So for the editing aspect of peer-to-peer review and using Google Docs, there's going to be two primary editing tools. One is comments and the other is suggestions. So for comments, what you'll do, and for both of the tools, you just have to highlight the section that you want, and then these icons will pop up. So the blue one is comments and the green one is suggestions. So for suggestions, you highlight that and you click the blue tab and a box will appear for you to add a comment. What's nice about the comment section, as I'll demonstrate here, is you can assign a comment to someone. So if you use @ and then I put Drea will get a notification that I assigned her a comment. And then you can add that comment. And then as for suggestions, again, you're gonna highlight whatever you want changed or that whatever your suggestion might be. And then it'll strike a line through what you highlighted and then enter what you suggested. And what's cool about that is in the box, if the individual who received the suggestion agrees with it, all they have to do is click this little check mark and it will change that and add it to their assignment. Anything you want to add to that, Drea?
No, but I think that those are the two tools that I use most when I was in the classroom for peer feedback on Google Docs.
Awesome. So now we're going to go ahead and transition to using Peer Deck to teach the students about peer-to-peer editing.
And so for this section, I don't have anything that's like a template for you because as Dante and I were working through this, there's so many different ways that you can ask for feedback. Depending on the type of assignment, that we just wanted to hit in some ideas. And so what I like is to use Peer Deck to teach my students how to give each other like targeted specific feedback. And so I do this by putting on my Google slide deck an example from a previous year or an example that I make up. And I say, okay, we're gonna give this student feedback. And so what I can do is I can model through each component of okay, if I was to give feedback on this specific part, or my student was to ask for feedback on this part, here's what I would say. I'm reading through it and I'm doing this. So I'm going to model for them how I think through my feedback process. And then I'm going to give them an attempt to try it through Pear Deck. And so I just add one of those writing slides and I say, okay, if this student were to ask for this feedback, what would you give them? And that is going to help my students want to actively participate, because like we've hit on before, the big barrier for our secondary students is that they may or may not have come to us with this culture of revision being processed. So we don't know what primary school that they're coming from, what middle school that they came from, if they came from out of district. And so their teachers may or may not have prioritized this culture of revision. And if they haven't, students are a little bit more hesitant towards offering up that information. And so Pear Deck allows them to take those risks, but they get to remain anonymous to the rest of their peers. And I also have, through my teacher dashboard, the ability to go through and select and highlight the student responses that I feel like are really beneficial. And they could be students who normally don't speak up in class, they don't typically get highlighted. But again, all of those are anonymous. And so it also helps when I can go through and select an answer that, may just need some tweaking so I can give feedback to their feedback. And it's a growing experience for them. And so if I were to incorporate this into daily practice of practicing giving feedback as a warm-up activity, maybe I'm going to take an example, and when we start class, I know that we're going to be looking at hook. I want them to give feedback on their hook statements. And so we are going to practice giving feedback to a fake student or a student in the past on their hook statements before they jump in and dive in with their small groups. So that's one way that you could definitely utilize Pear Deck for that. Again, Pear Deck, with its ability to allow students to interact in a more anonymous factor, really increases the participation, especially for our shyer students or our students who are less willing to take risk and be vulnerable in those situations. So from here on, we are here if you want to brainstorm anything, if you want to generate some ideas for feedback on assignments. Dante and I are here, we're available. Go ahead and just unmute and ask us questions. Otherwise, you have until 11:05 to work on your products.